Welcome to episode 5 of the Hipsters United podcast. My name is Chris, and accompanying me once again this week are Jason.
Hey.
Jill.
Hello.
And Andrew.
Hello.
Was that you playing 1979 there, Chris?
Yes, I had all my PVC pipe equipment out.
Those are some sweet pipes on that clip.
This week we have a discussion about the commercial future of the Pumpkins and a concert review, but before we get to that, we have one news topic. This week in the news, along with the PVC pipe rendition of 1979, the post-RockWalk interviews continue to trickle out despite the event occurring almost 3 weeks ago. And this week, GoTV Network's Altitude released a 3-minute piece on the induction, including a short interview where Billy implied that the band members that have toured since the revival may or may not be included in the tour starting this fall. And I have a clip here of the portion of the interview where he talked about that.
In the way it is now, is it intact, the same one you used on last tour? Is it going to be, you're going to use this band for the future, or you might change things up?
I think we're looking at it as sort of a project-to-project thing. We no longer feel the need to sort of present, like, this is the band. Even like when Melissa Oftemar was in the group in 2000, we sort of felt the need to sort of say, she's with the group. I don't think we feel the need to do that anymore. I think if we feel like we need to get 10 more people in to do 10 different things, I think we're going to start doing that. More of a collective mentality, or a duo with a collective, or a collective duo. Yeah.
So, Jill, what do you think about the idea, and do you have any ideas for likely guest musicians that may be in the collective, so to speak?
I think the idea of a collective, I mean, not that it's a new idea, but I think that it's been recently popularized by several groups on the indie rock scene. One of my brother's favorite bands, brother's favorite artist is Sufjan Stevens, and I've blogged about him a couple of times in the shows that I've seen here in New York City. And I think that, he as well aspires to have kind of a collective mentality that works really well for him and the people that he collaborates very closely with. I think it could work for the Pumpkins quite well because Billy has chosen the people that he wants to collaborate with really well in the past, and I think that it'll
really?
Well, I think they all have brought an interesting perspective to the band. I mean, whether you like them or not, Mike Garson was an amazing musician, even though a lot of folks think he killed some of the Adore songs on tour. I think he's chosen talented people that push him and challenge him as a musician, while still kind of maintaining the integrity of the band. So it should be interesting. I would be, very excited to see strings or, even additional instrumentation up on stage or in the studio. So I don't know. I really don't know where they're going with that, but I think it could be really cool. So,
speaking of strings, that's something that has actually been rumored around the band before. I don't know if you guys remember, and I happened across this when I was looking at the SPFC chronology the other day, but there was a rumor that the band was going to be doing an MTV Unplugged with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra back in 1996, and it got canceled for a number of reasons. It may just have been a rumor and never got off the ground, but that was also around the time where Jimmy got fired and that whole situation happened. So I know that Billy at least has shown interest in doing that kind of thing before. But Jason, it sounded like you disagreed with Jill about the band members or the contributors.
I think she's right that he brings in people with talent. I just don't know how long they stick around, or how long he maintains those relationships. The thing with the strings is interesting because it always seems very like the strings are there for one project. Like if you think about, I guess I would date the strings to what? They're on Daydream. There's a cello, I think. And then Siamese Dream, there's some cello, and they even had Eric Remschneider along on the tour a little. And then Tonight obviously is recorded with an orchestra, and I remember Billy saying that was one of the most exciting recording experiences he'd ever had. And then obviously recently we have Izan Spivak, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, playing her delicate violins on Super Christ. But it seems like it never really gets out of the studio too much. Aside from Eric Remschneider and playing Tonight at the MTV Awards, I can't really remember. I mean, Lisa Germano, the violinist, she was rumored to be part of the Adore touring band, and then she actually was, and she practiced with them, and then she got fired like the day before the tour started, much to Jeremy's dismay. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I can see, obviously, I think the pattern is there, and there'll probably be strings in the studio going forward, but if they ever go out on stage and there's like a string quartet or something with them, I'm going to be pretty surprised.
Do you think back when they were working on these projects in the studio prior to Zeitgeist, or in the first incarnation of the band, do you think that strings were actually a popular touring instrument, period? Because I feel like they've had a revival in the live arena, at least with sort of the indie rock era.
Jill, didn't you ever see the November Rain video?
Metallica had that whole album with the symphony orchestra. I assume that's where Billy got the idea.
Stole it from Lars. The funny thing is, I've never been a huge Metallica fan. I'm one of these people who's really sad and pathetic, who's like never been a huge Metallica fan. And then it's like, wow, that's kind of nice when they get with the symphony. I totally am like that. So, okay, this word collective, if I may take us in a hopefully more fruitful direction.
Sure.
I'm not really totally clear on what that means. It sounds like you have a big party house, and there's one guy who's really the band, and I guess in the Pumpkins' case it would be two guys who are really the band, and sometimes it's two, but you have a big house in Toronto, and your friends are just kind of drifting in and out, and like some of them are carrying smoking paraphernalia, and occasionally, they've got instruments. There's some bongos, and like I don't know.
So they start side projects and stuff too.
Yeah, it sounds like
they drift into another house, and then there's some other band down the street. I mean, I'm joking, but like this, like we've got a collective now. It's like, how is that different from a band? Because the people aren't really part of your band. They're just kind of hanging around your house. They're like, dude, play on the song, join the collective. There's like 60 of us all over the world. I mean, that's fine. If that's what it is, that's fine. But how is that? I mean, why is it a collective? Why don't we just say it's a duo with whoever we feel like hiring? I guess that just sounds, but isn't that what we're really talking about?
Yeah, it's pretty much a nice way of saying that, I think, that Billy's probably getting kind of tired at this point of all the questions about band members, and he really probably just wants to be free to, work with whoever's around and whoever he wants to work with without having to, justify that are they really members of the Smashing Pumpkins, or are they just touring musicians, or whatnot. I'm just wondering how they're going to handle things like varied set lists. It seems like it would be difficult to keep having a revolving door of musicians. Like, it seems like you'd have to teach these different people the same songs over and over again, or like, I don't know how they would handle that.
Well, money would be one way. I mean, if you have the money, you can hire the people and tell them, okay, I'm paying you. Now sit here for 2 months with me and learn this material, and then we're going to go tour, right? I mean, that would be one way to get it to happen. I don't know. I don't know if you're... I mean, not that you've said this specifically, Chris. I'm skeptical that the other members are as temporary as this kind of makes it sound. I just don't feel like they're coming back in the fall and it's going to be like, oh yeah, Jeff, nice to hear from you. Oh yeah, we've gone in another direction. Just doesn't quite feel like that to me.
Well, though, I think that I doubt that they would, be so caustic and dismissing other band members. But in that show with the German show with Uli John Roth, Corgan talked about, kind of being torn between the different types of music he wants to play. So, in this particular interview, he's talking about it on a project-to-project basis. So maybe the next project that they do is purely an acoustic, strip-oriented album or series of songs or something like that. So I don't think that, once you are not on tour with them at the current moment, they're they've banned you from the the touring roster. But maybe it's a little bit more fluid and I don't know.
Yeah, if they went out and they were doing something symphonic, what would be the role for Jeff Schroeder? Probably none.
Right.
Andrew, what do you think? Do you have any ideas for who might join the collective? Are we going to see a reappearance of the Frogs?
That's a interesting question. I don't have any ideas. It's sort of
maybe Uli John Roth.
Maybe
that would be something.
Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick.
And what's Uli got going on? Come on down.
Uli's living off his royalties in Switzerland, probably. I don't know if he actually lives in Germany. Most of the people who get rich in Germany move to Switzerland, but
I thought it was weird when I was watching that program, and the two of them are on stage, and it's like, okay, we're gonna jam, and then they start jamming, and it was like completely percussive, and I was like kind of staring at the screen, like these guys are supposed to go off on an ascending spiral to heaven or something, I mean, like the music is supposed to be like. And instead they were like creating this like beat almost with the guitars, and then they get done and they were like, yeah, that was awesome, who needs a drummer, who needs a band, I thought that was really bizarre, because they were supposed to be these, or Uli at least is the flower child playing some kind of Hendrixian lead, but it just wasn't that way.
You know what though, I feel like this sentiment comes out of the Superchrist collaboration as well, and being able to collaborate with precisely that, Jason, those 60s kind of flower children, feel good, vibey folks that are actually quite good at their instruments. He probably feels very positively about those experiences, and I think that's probably what would prompt him to say something like this in an interview. I don't know. It's hard to predict specifically who they would include, but we've already seen them involve several sort of non-traditional musicians that aren't specifically in the band right now.
Heck yeah! I mean, you saw Gary from the Seeds. I mean, the way that guy played bass on Superfly
exactly.
is unbelievable. I mean, you can't sign that guy up.
One thing I noticed from this interview that has nothing really to do with the band member stuff was that once again, I forget if it was Billy or if it was the interviewer, they talked about the how they're going to be working on both a new single coming out this fall and then doing work for a new album. And I don't know, it goes against kind of what Jimmy was talking about a couple months ago, where he was saying that they weren't going to do any more traditional albums. But I don't really see this as them changing their mind or anything. I just think they're tired of explaining to the media like what it means. Like when they say we're not doing an album again, and then everyone goes crazy. It's the Pumpkins aren't doing any more albums. I think it's easier for them just to say, yeah, we're doing work for a new album, and even though if they don't plan on releasing it as an album.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's exactly right.
If I were Billy, I'd be kind of tired of every time I say something like the media kind of jumps off the deep end.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I think I don't think anything's changed. I mean, what they said that they wanted to work on something like, they cited Siamese Dream and Melancholy. They wanted to build toward that level of work. I'm surprised they didn't mention Machina, because that was a long period worth of work, and it was like 50 songs. But I guess nobody likes it, so you don't want to say that and have people be like, "Oh, great, they're gonna go build up a level of work that's the equivalent of Machina. Where do I put in my pre-deposit?" Wow, there's a truck going by.
I was going to say, is somebody watching that wrestling thing that Billy's at right now?
Have the pay-per-view on.
There's supposed to be tumbleweeds or crickets when things fall silent. We have a truck.
So for this week's in-depth discussion, Jason posed us a question. Is the Pumpkins' biggest hit single yet to come? And unlike last week, I have a feeling that this one might actually cause some disagreement with us. So Jason, why don't you take the lead on this one, and then I'll take you down.
Well, I don't strongly believe that it is going to be this way, but I think there's a good chance that the Pumpkins end up with a hit song in the future that surpasses the success of 1979, which is their biggest hit song to date. If you read a lot of blogs and you read a lot of message boards about the Pumpkins, as I do, I think people have. I mean, they don't. If they don't have the chart data in front of them and they live in sort of an alternative rock world, the perception can be that, wow, the Pumpkins were huge back in 1996. They had these massive hits, 1979, Tonight, and Bullet with Butterfly Wings, and everybody knew these songs, and on and on. And they think that the band, Tonight was number one, and 1979 was number one. I mean, I'll see people write this very occasionally, because it's obviously not true. But, people will dash it off like, yeah, they had these massive hits. The band has never had a top 10 Billboard single. Never. 1979 got to number 12. That's the only one to make the top 20. Bullet with Butterfly Wings got to number 22. Tonight barely got in the top 40. So these songs that to Pumpkins fans were like world-breaking singles, it just wasn't. That didn't really happen. I mean, they were huge in alternative rock circles and on alternative rock radio, but they weren't being played in malls. They were selling Zero shirts in malls, but they probably weren't piping in 1979. So
how do you see that changing then in the future?
Well, yeah, one of the things that a lot of people have commented on in the culture right now is that it seems there's fragmentation. Markets are dividing and subdividing. I mean, this perception that these songs were huge hits is valid in a certain subculture. Those songs were huge in a certain subculture, of which David Pajo was not part because he was listening to Delta Blues in Louisville. And that, I mean, I bring that up to be funny, but also because it's totally valid. I mean, I completely believe that he wasn't sitting there listening to alternative rock radio at that moment in time, and because most people were not. So the question that I have about the future is, if this trend keeps continuing, who is going to have the big hits? And I think Billy has mentioned this, it doesn't seem like the last decade has produced the sort of level of rock band that has sort of not massive, but really wide appeal. Like, if you said the names of today's most chart successful bands to people, they don't know who they are. I mean, they've never even heard the names. I haven't really heard the names. I think they're called Hinder, and maybe people have heard of Nickelback. I don't think I've ever heard the music of these bands, because I'm now in some fragmented subculture of my own. But when the Pumpkins came back, I was kind of surprised at how much media attention they got. And I think it has something to do with this fact that they have a known brand name that they established back when, even though the culture was fragmented in some ways, probably it was still more together than it is now, because fragmentation is just going on. Maybe it's even speeding up, I don't know. But we're further down the road of fragmentation now than we were back then. So their name and their image still has some resonance with kind of a broad sweep of the population. I mean, they once sold 4 million copies of Siamese Dream, and then they backed it up and sold 4 million copies of Melancholy. So they're known to a lot of people. That name is out there. And I just wonder if that works for them going forward on simply recognition that they've been around. Like, if you think about Pearl Jam, they were famous. And their biggest hit comes with that song Last Kiss, which is a cover, and that's by far their biggest hit on radio. And it comes late in their career. Most people are probably not thinking Pearl Jam is about to have a hit single, and they do. And I think it was Pearl Jam. I think some other band could have come up with that song, and it probably wouldn't have been a smash. And I wonder if the Pumpkins can't capture some of that lightning at some point, that the stars just align and it's like everybody's ready to hear some Smashing Pumpkins again, and Billy digs something up and just kind of captures people's attention almost because of their old brand name, and it's like, hey, yeah, Smashing Pumpkins, they're back, they got a hit. People have said that this sort of thing happens with U2 and with REM and other bands like this, that like they go out of style for a while and then they come back and everyone's like, wow, REM's back, Michael Stipe is awesome. and then they have some new song, and then they just go away again. And I wonder if that dynamic might work in their favor at some point in the future. Okay, that's it.
Well, and I think that's interesting too, Jason, because, you consider as sort of, I think that name brand recognition is important because the people that were alternative, our generation, perhaps, back in the mid-90s, are now kind of entering into that adult contemporary demographic. And that sounds really scary, but you think about it, the time in 96, 95, 96, the top 40, I just looked it up on Wikipedia, and apparently the Hot 100 airplay #1 hits of 1996 included collaborations by like Mariah Carey and Boyz II Men, Celine, Dion, really sort of what I consider bad adult contemporary from that time period. But now, currently, on Billboard, the top track of the adult contemporary chart is Daughtry, which is, rock. I mean, say what you will. I think, doesn't your mom like Daughtry or something?
She does. And and so that's when I heard them, is because she was playing it in the car, and I just immediately thought, wow, it's like the descendants of Soundgarden, except made safe for my mom, right?
Yes. Distilled down to the non-threatening quality.
Yeah, I don't think Daughtry has a song called Jesus Christ Pose.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, these people are entering into the top 40 adult contemporary kind of genre, and as far as the demographic is concerned, that name brand recognition, I think, is what kind of could potentially put them on one of those charts. Although I'm totally cringing at my computer right now.
Yeah, I'm not saying I want this to happen.
Well, it could be. It would be really good for them for recognition, but at the same time, because those markets are so segmented, I don't even know anybody that listens to the radio in that respect anymore, even though there's, and that's just in my quote-unquote subculture, but even if they have a radio hit, will it matter that much? How will it matter?
That's a good question.
Do you think it will promote album sales?
There
or
will
just
be no more albums.
Well, exactly. Will it promote track downloads? I just don't know what it means. I mean, you think about. I'm looking right now. The tracks on the Hot Adult Top 40 tracks this week. This just makes me feel skeezy. But it's Daughtry, Colby, Kayat, Maroon 5. A lot of these artists.
We are old.
No, I'm
trying to read their names.
Matchbox 20 is in the top 10, and they were around back in the mid 90s. It's just.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to suggest, is that this last 8 or 10 years doesn't seem to have like name creation ability.
Right.
Like, it doesn't happen anymore. Like, nobody becomes a name band. Like that dynamic just doesn't exist.
Well, and it's. I think we've talked about this before. It's just that kind of flash in the pan mentality where if your track gets picked up for an Apple commercial, you're all over the radio waves, and then where do you go?
She's that Apple girl, that iPod girl. Yeah, that was
exactly.
a good song.
Exactly, and it becomes so. My point is, maybe they could have a top 40 hit in the future, but what does it matter, and what does it affect?
See, I
really don't know.
I think it takes fewer sales to get to the top of the charts these days. So it might be that they have a #1 hit in 2025, and that means that they sold it to 6,000 people.
Yeah, you look at, even right now, the #20 hit on this chart is Yael Naim, who's a French artist from an Apple commercial.
I think in this day and age, it's hard kind of to, it's all about promotion. In order to get, a top single, it's all about getting as many people as possible to hear your song, because then if you have the percentage of people that download it, I guess the top 40 today is based mostly on song downloads. It used to be based on, sales of singles, but do they even make singles anymore? I don't really know, actual CD singles. But it seems like when I looked at the top 10, I didn't look at the adult contemporary or whatever. I just looked at the basic top 40, and it was all like artists from American Idol and pop groups and hip hop groups. Like there wasn't even any rock on there at all. And I don't know. I don't really look at the Billboard stuff a lot. I don't know if there's like a separate chart for rock or what, but I didn't see anybody on there who is even comparable to the Pumpkins. So I think they're going to have a hard time. Like in this, like with the internet nowadays, I think it's easier to get the word out, and especially for like a band like the Pumpkins, which as you guys both said, like they have a name brand out there. It's not like they have to come out of nowhere. They already have a fan base who will pass along the songs on YouTube and post videos and post like tell all their friends about it. But I just don't see them getting a huge, like a big enough mainstream following as like some of these acts in American Idol and things where like people can't help but be exposed to it. And as far as the quality of the songs go, I actually think that Billy is getting better at writing singles, or at least choosing the singles from the albums. Like for instance, from Bullet Butterfly Wings you had 1979, or from Melancholy you had 1979 and Bullet Butterfly Wings. Like those weren't the songs from the album that I really liked. Like the whole, and I think a lot of the hardcore fans would agree with me. Like when you listen to Melancholy, what's everybody's favorite song? For a lot of people, it's Through the Eyes of Ruby, which is not a single. But as you get towards Machina, like I loved Stand Inside Your Love. I actually thought that was one of the best songs from the album. And same with Zeitgeist. I thought Tarantula was an excellent song, but as they've gone along, like those songs haven't really made a dent on the charts. So
yeah, it shows what you know.
Obviously, I don't agree with
the... They did a terrible job picking 1979 as the single. That one flopped.
I think, the one way that this sort of number one hit in the future could happen is if they get somehow, I think it might be, if it ever happens, it would be like a soundtrack song that for a really big movie that everyone goes to see, that just gets like a summer blockbuster where their song is featured somehow in the opening, in the commercials, and then in the movie somehow, where everyone knows about it, everyone is talking about it, and everyone obviously likes the song. And I think that would be the most plausible way that they somehow have beat number 12 on the Billboard chart for coming out of nowhere.
Yeah,
so to speak.
But that's probably totally right, because they're not going to have a label. I mean, how do you get on radio these days? Does anyone even listen to the radio? I don't know. Maybe they do, but
in my subculture, as we've been saying, everyone listens. Everyone has a XM subscription and listens to their own little channel. That they're of the 100 channels on XM, they have their narrow one channel that they like, has songs that they like. XM is pretty. The channels are pretty. There's lots of channels, and they're all pretty narrow.
Mm-hmm.
The people I know that listen to a lot of music get their kind of new music and things like that from Rhapsody. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that online service. It's not like iTunes in that you have to pay to download songs. You pay a monthly subscription, and you can listen to whatever you want, but you can't bring it with you. Like, you don't own the song, you just own the rights to listen to anything. So I don't know if that kind of thing's even figured in top 40. I don't know how it's even calculated anymore.
Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to the idea of what does it really matter? And I would even go further to say, is the band writing for a top 40 hit? In the past, I would have thought perhaps, because they did, see so much commercial success. They released Super Christ as a single, or whatever it was. And that's not particularly friendly to the lay person. Even Tarantula, even though it's, I think, radio friendly, it's not constructed in a typical pop format at all. And I think, taking it back to this whole collaborative idea, is it the goal of the band to be really commercially successful? I think, Corgan talks a lot in his interviews and in some of the press that we've seen about disappointment at not being more commercially successful. But if you look at the actual output of the band itself, there's some sort of disconnect, I think. So.
Well, in the Uli John Roth kind of, I don't say it's an interview, it's a television program where he spent the evening with Uli John Roth. But Billy actually talks about, yeah, it's a mandate pretty much. But Billy talked about like how he has that kind of, he wants to be spoiled and he likes playing to large crowds. So I think that, I mean, while they're definitely going in a more artistic direction, I think that part of Billy's, at least, I don't know about Jimmy, but part of Billy still kind of wants that quick, ego-gratifying, hey, I've got a top 10 single type feeling.
I've sold 25 million albums. What have you done, Dave Pajo? Yeah, I think they're doing both. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Jill, but I mean, yeah, there was Super Christ. There was also That's the Way, which, That's the Way My Love Is, that wonderful parenthetical subtitle. When we started the blog, back when no one was reading it, before our current wonderful success, topping the blog charts.
Speaking of commercial success.
That's right. We were number one. But I don't know what the word to use, but I kind of poked at this song like all the time. I kept making like little remarks like, yeah, the sellout single, I don't think I called it a sellout. But, you know, I basically said he wrote this song to be a hit. And I didn't really like the song. And the funny thing is it has grown on me somewhat, especially after hearing a couple of different versions of it. But, you know, yeah, you're dead on correct, Jill, when you talk about Tarantula not having a conventional arrangement. I couldn't believe that song was as successful as it was. I was shocked. But That's the Way is like, you could put it through a meat grinder. It's like exactly got a very conventional structure. Now it's very well executed for what it is. But for what it is, I mean, what it is kind of dull, I mean, I think. So, and if you look back, there's that kind of pop song. It's usually track 3 or 4 on their last few records. That's the Way, Stand Inside Your Love, as Chris mentioned, and Perfect. You know, it's like, in 1979, I think, again, fits into that. It's like that song. You could even go far back and say Today was that song. You know?
Right.
So, I think that will continue. I don't know.
And
I'm a big believer in established patterns continuing. So.
Yeah. But you're right, Jason. Without them having a label and without them kind of having the traditional structure of mass marketing right now, I think Andrew's totally dead on that. Yeah, if all it's going to take is a movie, you know, Zach Braff coming in and creating some hit soundtrack that, you know, propels them back to greatness along with Imogene Heap and Frou Frou or something. So I don't know. It's very possible, and those types of marketing ventures really work.
But didn't they try that last summer? They were in Transformers. You can't get any more big budget Hollywood blockbuster than that. Was Doomsday Clock not? I never saw the movie. I don't know if Doomsday Clock was not featured in the song in the movie or not.
Well, that's, I think, part of the problem in some respects, because if it's this blockbuster, you know, mass-produced, big-budget film, there's no sort of cult appeal to it like there was with Garden State or some of these other very soundtrack-heavy movies. I don't know. I mean, I referenced that one because everybody and their mother ever asked me if I'd bought that soundtrack. But like, do you know anybody that's bought the soundtrack to Transformers?
No.
Exactly.
If we didn't have a hit on the level of 1979, or even that exceeds it, it's going to have to be the love theme from the movie. It's not going to be Doomsday Clock.
Exactly.
That Transformers song kicked butt. I'm going to go get that. My mom will be listening to it. I mean, we're talking about, is there going to be a song that your mom's going to be listening to? You know, and, well, it's not that we can't have other conversations at the same time, but, I mean, that's kind of what I thought this was about.
Yeah, something like, you know, Celine Dion's "My Heart Will Go On." You know,
something like
in that vein.
Twice in one podcast, Celine Dion. Wow.
You know what I thought was funny is that at one point, especially when Chris started talking about Rhapsody or whatever, I started to think, wow, even the four of us are not part of the same subculture. But then you mentioned Zach Braff, and we all laughed, so clearly Zach ties us all together.
Yes.
Well, I didn't preview it during last week's show, but I wanted to do a concert review this week of the Berlin Secret show last summer, and it was June 5th, 2007 to be precise. And this is kind of to get back at Jason, who during the first few weeks of the podcast was kind of getting on me for always choosing the older songs for the closing song of the week.
When I give you a hard time, it's behind the scenes. In the comments.
Yeah, the comments of the blog are definitely behind the scenes, but
no one reads those. This
one, this is a post-revival show, and I thought this kind of tied into what we were talking about a few weeks ago also with a show for the hardcore fans, because this I think was a show for the hardcore fans. There were only 200 fans there. I believe it was, there were differing reports between 150 and 200. And I think they got tickets to the show by winning a contest that you entered. My memory on this is fuzzy, but even though it was only less than a year ago, but I think you had to answer trivia questions online about the Pumpkins. Do any of you guys remember?
No.
Well, this was in Germany, so that's pretty tough for us.
I think I remember reading on the message boards about it. But since none of you guys remember to the contrary, I'll just state it as fact, and somebody can correct me in the comments.
Sure, why not?
The show took place in an old castle outside of Berlin, right?
Right.
An old, an actual castle. And from the reports that I had read way back then, they had to win a contest in order to be part of the actual show itself. I think, I think the competition for the tickets was quite severe, and I do think that there was some sort of trivia proponent.
I thought I was the expert pronouncer of venue names, and since neither of you have even tried it, can I go for it?
Go ahead. I wasn't even going to attempt it.
I had high school German. It's Gotischer Saal Citadel Spandau in Berlin.
There's a nice picture of the Citadel on the live archive.org website. It's like
Du hast? Du hast me? I don't, whatever.
Is that the extent of your German?
That was outstanding. And Zeitgeist.
And Zeitgeist.
Well, this show was a pretty unique experience. It was all acoustic, and it was a pretty long all acoustic show, and I don't know if this was their longest ever all-acoustic show. They did that show in Carrboro, North Carolina during the Sacred and Profane tour. Or maybe it was the tour right before Sacred and Profane. It was when they were promoting Machina, and there was that show where I think Jimmy's drums got lost, or they didn't make it to the show on time, or Jimmy was sick, or there was something with Jimmy where they couldn't bring the rock, and they ended up doing an entire show all acoustic. And I know James did a rendition of Be Strong Now, and they played a lot of Machina songs acoustic, and I think that may be the only longer all acoustic show. They've done a couple other smaller acoustic shows. There was one in Sydney, I think, in March of 1996. I don't know if that was a show or just a radio interview. I'm remembering back on my bootleg collecting days. There was the 1991, I think, hotel room where Billy apparently played a couple songs on an acoustic guitar in a hotel room for a radio host. But I thought the show was interesting because when they play the songs acoustically, you kind of get a different sense of the songs than you do when they play them all out rock. And at least for me, I kind of appreciate some songs better, kind of knowing without the wall of guitars in front of them, you can kind of get a sense of really what the song is about without kind of all that in the way. And for this show especially, they played a few of the new Zeitgeist songs, and this was before the album was released. This was when those of us on the other side of the world, like us, had only heard them from bootlegs from the concerts, so we got to hear songs like Bleeding the Orchid, Tarantula, and United States, but without all of the crazy guitar wankery, or with more interesting guitar wankery, especially during Gossamer. I don't know if you guys listened to the show or have heard it recently, but I thought this version of Gossamer was really interesting, and I personally almost never listen to all of Gossamer. It's just, that's not really my thing.
Ooh, sacrilege.
But
you have been fired as the host.
But this one I thought was really interesting. It had kind of like a classical guitar sound to it that you don't really get out of any of the other Gossamer performances. Or if you do, it's drowned out by layers and layers of distortion and drums.
Awesomeness.
And the crowd during the show was very respectful and quiet, unlike the Double Door show that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. This crowd didn't even cheer when they recognized the beginning of a song that was unique, which I thought was very different than most shows we hear get posted up to the Live Music Archive. Usually when they start playing like the first few bars of Today or Drown or the kind of the crowd favorites, there's that big burst of cheering when they hear the distinct intro.
The crying tree of Mercury.
But this time there was nothing. The crowd, the only time that I heard that they cheered in the middle of a song was after Billy pulled off the acoustic, or I don't know whether he really pulled it off or not, but the acoustic solo in Tarantula, which you could tell he was kind of having fun with, and the crowd kind of gave him a little cheer after that. But they played a pretty varied set list at this show, pretty much covering all aspects of the band's career, except for Adore. I think they only played one song from Adore. They played Shame, and that was it. But one interesting thing about this is the first time they had played Daydream in a number of years, and a lot of the fan community was a little bit outraged and kind of took it as disrespect to Darcy that Billy was playing her song, quote unquote, when she was no longer in the band. And I thought it was kind of a non-factor since Billy wrote the song. It wasn't even one of the ones that she had collaborated on. But do you guys remember that? Did you have any reaction to that?
I do remember it, and I think it is sort of a dig at. I don't know if it's a dig at Darcy, but I mean, think about it. The guy's got a few hundred songs, and this is within the first 10 shows that they were back, you know. And of all the songs to pull off of Gish, Daydream, right? The one Darcy sings, I think it was. There's a message, I thought, in there, and I wasn't outraged. I just thought, wow, he's going there. Okay. It was. I thought, you know, you could just see it as he's asserting, hey, this is my song.
Yeah, exactly. I think Darcy sung it, but I wrote it. My song. Yeah.
My song. My song.
Well, even before the song, he had a little quote about. Yeah, he kind of told the audience like what he was thinking about when he wrote it. He talked about like living with his father when he was younger or something like that. So I don't know if that was meant to be another way of taking ownership of the song, but I actually have a clip of Daydream to play. Not his quote, but just a clip of the song. Because I actually thought it was an excellent rendition of the song, and it sounded especially good acoustically. So it was a little bit different. The show was a very, from listening to it, it was a lot easier to listen to this week than it was listening to the Double Door show, just because it was a lot more polished. And after the show, there was a question and answer period with the people in attendance, and I think that the questions were pre-arranged. Like they somehow let the people in the crowd submit questions in advance. So there was a German host who was reading the questions. And at one point they asked, the questions for the most part were pretty, like, kind of inane fan questions. You know, when will you come to Poland? Did the 2007 and the Pisces Iscariot liner notes, was that a prediction that you would come back as a band in 2007? And things like that. And one person asked, what was it like to meet Homer Simpson? And Billy let Jimmy respond to that one, and I have Jimmy's response here because I thought it was pretty entertaining.
Homer Simpson is not a real person. Homer Simpson is a cartoon.
Well, so I'll ask the question that I asked with the Double Door show. Would any of you guys like to see this show get officially released someday with the opening of the archives? Andrew, Let's start with you.
Okay. Yes, I would. I think that it's an excellent show in terms of their musicianship, and also widely, as you mentioned, it was, except for Adore, you got a little bit of every era. Yeah, I think you had at least 2 songs in every album other than Adore. So it's it's a good snapshot of each part of their career. Like you said, the crowd was well behaved, so you don't have the annoying crowd to distract you from the songs, and a lot of the arrangements were pretty. Some were pretty original, and some you've heard before, but are still well done. So yeah, I'd pay a few bucks to download this album officially if it was, or buy it if it was released in actual hard format.
What about you, Jason?
Oh, I'm gonna disagree. Why not?
Okay.
Fine, says Andy. Couple of reasons. One, audience recordings of acoustic shows are usually really good. Really hard to tell the difference between that and the soundboard, well-mixed version that they'd released professionally. So that'd be one reason not to choose this one, is because maybe it's probably the exact reason Chris is talking about, except in inverse. If you're thinking about trying to hear something that you wouldn't normally hear, better to spend a lot of work with a soundboard tape of one of those shows where they've got all those extra layers of awesome on the top, and really work on that mix, versus an acoustic show that the difference between the official version and the one we already have is probably going to be pretty small. So that'd be one reason. The second reason, as I mentioned, this is one of the first 10 shows by the new band. I don't know. I gotta be honest. I don't find it totally impressive. I think the band was far tighter 5 months later, and I would rather hear one of those shows. I mean, I'm an economist. I always am thinking about trade-offs, and so I'm always thinking, if they release this show, it's some other show they're not releasing. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not just like, oh, sure, release everything. I mean, that's just not a valid way of looking at this sort of question, I think. So, if it's this, or, I would pick a lot of other shows before I'd pick this one. But I say that in large part because we already have what I figure is a good recording. And I'd contrast that, if we're going to be doing more shows in the future, maybe I should keep my lips quiet about what shows I would like. So, let's move on.
What about you, Jill? You chimed in with a yes there before I interrupted you before.
I think that it would be really well suited to a DVD. I think, maybe like Jason said, not necessarily an audio download, because the quality of the audience recording is already great. But, they're in this beautiful romantic setting. It's a daytime show. Billy's at an acoustic, at a grand piano, which I can only assume is a Steinway or some sort of beautiful piano. They actually, if you check out the archive.org recording of this show, there are a bunch of pictures included, and there are candles lit all around the stage. It's a beautiful show, and I think that, you mentioned earlier Tarantula, and I think Billy totally screws up the solo. It kind of humanizes the band. I think it's funny, but it's also like, this was their attempt to already rework some of the songs that they had only been playing for a few nights, and I think it would be a really kind of exemplary video of the new band, for lack of a better phrase. Plus, I think that the arrangements are really cool. So,
for me, I think it definitely brings up the question of whether the hardcore fans would buy something they've already pretty much gotten for free. Like Jason said, we already have a great audience recording of this that we can download for free. And the band has to know that. I mean, if they're going to be thinking about releasing something, I think Billy's pretty aware of what's out there in the online community. I think he's shown in the past that he's kind of aware of what's out there. So that kind of would have to come into their minds when they're picking shows. I think I would buy it just because I agree with Jill that it's such a great show in terms of arrangement and in terms of uniqueness. And I really like the acoustic kind of thing as a kind of as a change of pace. I don't think I'd like them to do go all acoustic, do only an acoustic tour. I like it as kind of a change of pace. So Jason can still have his layers of awesome.
Yeah, you just don't like awesome.
But I think that if they did release this, there would be some people that really liked it, but the audience for these kind of open the archives type things, I assume in the end is going to be the hardcore fans, and I think they're going to have a hard time selling something like this that a lot of the fans would just say, oh, well, I already have this. I don't really see any need. I already have the MP3s of it on my iPod, and what good is a little bit better sound quality?
Well, but also on the flip side, y'all are boys. And I think that there is still a sizable contingency of the Smashing Pumpkins fan base that would find some sort of a download or a video of this show to be particularly romantic of one of their favorite lead singers.
You're saying you would buy it because you think Billy's hot.
No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that there's a lot. I think there's, for better or for worse, there are a lot of Billy fangirls, and this would be probably one of the numero uno on their list. Maybe. Just
he's in a castle.
Putting it out there. Yeah, he's in a castle, and acoustic guitar and grand piano, and.
I'm not sure I want to know about the outtakes, but.
I'm just putting it out there, okay?
Hey, no.
I
think it's a good point.
All right. Well, Andrew, what do we have this week in Pumpkins history?
Okay. Well, this week we got sort of calls back to a post that one of the posts on the blog this week at hipstersunited.com about a 20-year-old kid who got collapsed at the Pumpkin show in Vancouver in this past year, and the coroner has said that the concert was not, or he did not die in a crush in the mosh pit. That hasn't stopped various people from writing stories that said that he did get killed in the mosh pit. Well, this isn't unfortunately the first time this happened to Pumpkins. Back in 1996, during their big World Melancholy tour, they were playing a show in Dublin, Ireland, on May 11th, 1996, and a 17-year-old teenage girl, Bernadette O'Brien, was up near the front of the crowd and basically got crushed to death, and came out of the concert in a coma and eventually died a few days later. And four other, according to the snap or the little snippet of the story on spfc.org, four other people were also injured, because he wasn't certainly the only person hurt in the accident. So certainly a tough time for the band for that to happen to them. They were they canceled another show in Ireland, in Belfast. I forget how many, if it was the next day or a couple of days later, as a mark of respect for her, and certainly sent their condolences and to the family and friends of the band. So that was a sort of a sad moment, and sort of behind the scenes at that point in time, sort of the bad events of 1996 were just starting to bubble up. Previously in the month, behind the scenes, Jonathan and Jimmy were already getting in trouble with drugs, and so it was probably not. It was obviously probably a tough time for the band at that point in time. So a little bit of some sad bumps in history this week. Sorry to bring everybody down.
Well, before we go, I wanted to announce a little audience participation type thing to cheer everybody up that I wanted to try out. A couple of weeks from now is the 10th anniversary of the release of Adore, and we were planning to do a full podcast all about Adore. And during the show, I wanted to try and include some listener comments about the album, so you can love it, hate it, whatever. just record yourself talking about the Adore album or live tour and send it to me at chris@hipstersunited.com. Please keep your comments to less than 60 seconds and try and reduce background noise, trucks, that sort of thing as much as possible. And either WAV or MP3 format is fine. I'll pick the best ones for the show, and if we don't get any submissions, then I'll conveniently never mention this again. So
brave man, Chris.
So to close things out this week, I thought that our closing song could be Tarantula from the Berlin Secret Show that we talked about June 5th, 2007. Good night, everybody.
I would like to try for you now, for the first time ever, our new single, Tarantula, solo acoustic. I've never tried this, so it will be an interesting journey. We named this song a Tarantula after the famous German band The Scorpions. They're one of our favorite bands. And so, to the Scorpions. You laugh, but I'm serious.
Don't let me say this, but you know what's to me. It's crazy, we are the real, if real ever was. And just because we are the real, the fear we had enough. We are the real, 'cause someone gave us hope. I wanna be there when you're happy. I wanna love you when you're sad. Can't stand the pouring rain. Get out and take your place. Then can't stand the lazy summer. Close your eyes, you'll see the angel dust. A million watts of sound can't compare. Come along, you'll see the world. The pulse ripples, the crowd unfurls. The current starts to flow, then you're on. It gets so hot, so long. The same fun, we are real, if real ever was. And just because we are a very limit zone, we are so real, 'cause someone gave us hope. Don't break the yoke, I wanna love you when you're happy. Don't break the song, I won't be there when you're sad. We spent the pouring rain. We are real, as real as it goes. So easy now, we are real in every little zone. Don't they know? Can't stand
Hipsters United podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Smashing Pumpkins or Warner Brothers Reprise Music. All opinions offered by panelists or guests of the Hipsters United podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of the Smashing Pumpkins. All audio used during the show is licensed for non-profit use per the terms and conditions on the Live Music Archive at archive.org. Intro music is from the Machina 2 album released for free download on the internet by the Smashing Pumpkins in August of 2000.